Banyan.
Dazed and Confucius.
An ancient philosophy becomes a political punchbag.
An ancient philosophy becomes a political punchbag.
Confucian Land is a cultural exhibition in the South Korean city of Andong.
Confucian Land is a cultural exhibition in the South Korean city of Andong.
Land is a cultural exhibition in the South Korean city of Andong. It first asks visitors to reflect on the horrors of contemporary society.
It first asks visitors to reflect on the horrors of contemporary society.
It first asks visitors to reflect on the South Korean city of Andong. It first asks visitors to reflect on the horrors of contemporary society, including war, consumerism, and sexual license.
Including war, consumerism, and sexual license. It first asks visitors to reflect on the horrors of contemporary society, including war, consumerism, and sexual license.
It then invites them to travel through a tunnel of time to 16th century Korea.
It then invites them to travel through a tunnel of time to 16th century Korea.
When Confucianism was the official philosophy of the royal court.
When Confucianism was the official philosophy of royal court. It then asks visitors to reflect. It then
travel through a consumerism and sexual license. It then invites them to travel through a tunnel of time to 16th century Korea, when Confucianism was the official philosophy of the royal court.
It then invites them to travel through a tunnel of time to 16th century Korea, when Confucianism was the official philosophy of the royal court.
When Confucianism was the official philosophy of the royal court. The Korea of yore is portrayed as a harmonious utopia.
The Korea of yore is portrayed as a harmonious utopia.
Save for the occasional battle against Japanese invaders.
Save for the occasional battle against Japanese invaders. The Korea of yore is portrayed as a harmonious utopia, save for the occasional battle against Japanese invaders.
Virtuous conduct imply the displays charting the daily life of a Confucian scholar in a humble village.
Virtuous conduct imply the displays charting the daily life of a Confucian scholar in a humble village. Underpinned perfect social cohesion. Virtuous conduct imply the displays charting the daily life of a Confucian scholar in a humble village, and underpinned perfect social cohesion.
Some observers, including both Koreans and foreigners, are inclined to attribute all the successes of contemporary South Korea.
Observers, including both Koreans and foreigners, are inclined to attribute all the successes of contemporary South Korea to the lingering influence of Confucianism. Some observers, including Koreans and foreigners, are inclined to attribute all the successes of contemporary South Korea to the lingering influence of Confucianism.
Rapid economic development, the academic prowess of Korean students, even the largely successful curbing of COVID-19.
Rapid economic development, the academic prowess of Korean students, and even the largely successful curbing of COVID-19.
Even the largely successful curbing of COVID-19, it is all thanks to the ancient Chinese system of thought.
It is all thanks to the ancient Chinese system of thought. Imported to Korea 2,000 years ago. rapid economic development, the academic prowess of Korean students, and even the largely successful curbing of COVID-19. It is all thanks to it is all thanks to it is it is all thanks to the ancient Chinese system of thought imported to Korea more than 2,000 years ago.
To the opposite extreme, blaming Confucianism for all manner of latter-day blights.
Others go to the opposite extreme, blaming Confucianism for all the manner of latter-day blights.
The opposite extreme, blaming Confucianism for all manner of latter-day blights. Inclusive extreme, blaming Confucianism for all manner of latter-day blights.
Others go to the opposite extreme, blaming blaming Confucianism for all manner of latter-day blights.
Blaming Confucianism for all manner of latter-day blights, including authoritarianism, sexism, stifling workplace hierarchies,
Including authoritarianism, sexism, stifling workplace hierarchies,
and entrenched corruption in industrial conglomerates.
Others go to the opposite extreme, blaming Confucianism for all manner of latter-day blights, including authoritarianism, sexism, stifling workplace hierarchies, and entrenched corruption in industrial conglomerates.
To attribute all that is good or bad to Confucianism,
more than a century after it ceased to be Korea's official state ideology, is at best absurdly reductive. To attribute all that is good or bad to Confucianism, more than a century after it ceased to be Korea's official state ideology, is at best absurdly reductive. Yet it is invoked in part because it remains so visible. Kwon Seok-kwan shows visitors around the school in Andong. Founded by Yi Huang, the 16th century Confucian scholar who graces the 1001 bill. Kwon Seok-kwan shows visitors around the school in Andong. Founded by Yi Huang, the 16th century Confucian scholar who graces the 1001 bill. He insists that Yi Huang continues to be a role model for his renunciation of worldly concerns in the pursuit of knowledge. He insists that Yi Huang continues to be a role model for his renunciation of worldly concerns in the pursuit of knowledge. Long-suffering pupils across the country are taught classical poetry and calligraphy, all with a Confucian bent. Long-suffering pupils across the country are taught classical poetry and calligraphy, all with a Confucian bent.
Confucian ceremonies to revere ancestors remain common practice among many Korean families.
Confucian ceremonies to revere ancestors remain common practice among many Korean families.
Inevitably, Confucian tradition has taken on a political tint.
It's often used as a label is often used as a label whenever people want to praise or criticize society.
Says Kim Du-il of the Institute of Confucian Philosophy and Culture.
Says Kim Du-il of the Institute of Confucian Philosophy and Culture.
At Sun Kyun Kwan University, the successor to a Confucian academy set up in the 14th century.
At Sungkyunkwan University, the successor to a Confucian academy set up in the 14th century, is often used as a label whenever people want to praise or criticize society. Says Kim Du-il of the Institute of Confucian Philosophy and Culture at Sungkyunkwan University, the successor to the successor to the success the successor the successor the successor to the successor to Confucian Academy set up in the 14th century.
What people say about Confucianism often provides a clue
What people say about Confucianism often provides a clue
to their contemporary political convictions.
What people say about Confucianism often provides a clue to their contemporary political convictions.
One notable example is Park Chung-hee, a military dictator in the 1960s and 1970s.
One notable example is Park Chung-hee, a military dictator in the 1960s and 1970s,
who redefined the Confucian virtues of filial piety and loyalty,
who redefined the Confucian virtues of filial piety and loyalty in a way that legitimized his authoritarianism. One notable example is Park Chung-hee, a military dictator in the 1960s and 1970s, who redefined the Confucian virtues of filial piety and loyalty in a way that legitimized his authoritarianism. Says Ro Young-chan of George Mason University. Park wanted citizens to identify with the state.
In effect, he sought to create the obedient Asians of racist stereotypes.
In effect, he sought to create the obedient Asians of racist stereotypes. A trope that has resurfaced during the pandemic. To explain more conscientious mask wearing and social distancing in South Korea than in America or Europe. In fact, he sought to create the obedient Asians of racist stereotypes, a trope that has resurfaced during the pandemic, to explain more conscientious mask wearing and social distancing in South Korea than in America or Europe. Park is not the only one to have used Confucianism.
Feminists invoke the term to grumble about women's outsized domestic duties.
Feminists often invoke the term to grumble about women's outsized domestic duties, or the expectation that they will pour drinks for male friends.
20-somethings cited when lamenting parental meddling in their personal affairs.
20-somethings cited when lamenting about their parental meddling in their personal affairs. 20-somethings cited with lamenting parental meddling in their personal affairs.
Conservatives say that deference to elders and humility towards strangers are national traits. Say that deference to elders and in their personal affairs, duties. Feminists invoke the term to grumble about women's outsized domestic duties, or the expectation that they will pour drinks for male friends.
Feminists invoke the term to grumble about women's outsized domestic duties, or the expectation that they will pour drinks for male friends.
20-somethings cited when lamenting parental meddling in their personal affairs.
20 somethings cited when lamenting parental meddling in their personal affairs.
Cited when lamenting parental meddling in their personal affairs. Conservatives say that deference to elders and humility towards strangers
Conservatives say that deference to elders and humility towards strangers
are national traits based on Confucian values,
are national traits based on Confucian values,
which are sadly being eroded by modern ideas.
which is sadly being
Which are sadly being eroded by modern ideas. One told your correspondent
Conservatives say that humility towards strangers and deference to elders are national traits based on Confucian values that are
being eroded by modern national traits based on Confucian values,
which is sadly being eroded by modern ideas.
One told your correspondent that Confucius wanted to live in Korea
One told your correspondent that Confucius wanted to live in Korea
because its inhabitants were so polite.
because its inhabitants were so polite.
Claim that is hard to verify 2,500 years after the sage's demise.
A claim that is hard to verify after
Hard to verify
2,500 years after the sage's demise.
500 told your correspondent that Confucius wanted to live in Korea
One told your correspondent that Confucius wanted to live in Korea because its inhabitants were so polite, a claim that is hard to verify 2,500 years after the sage's demise.
because its inhabitants were so polite. The claim that is hard to verify 2,500 years after the sage's demise. But even if the invocation of Confucianism says more about the invoker's disdain for
But even if
years after the sage's demise. But even if the invocation of Confucianism says more about the invoker's disdain for social convention
says more about the invoker's disdain for social convention
Confucianism says more about the invoker's disdain for social convention or nostalgia for a non-existent past
or not nostalgia for a non-existent past
than about the tradition itself.
That still reflects its enduring influence.
Mr. Rowe of George Mason University argues that
Confucianism forms part of South Koreans' social subconscious, which leads people to assume or chafe against certain social norms, even if they rarely think about their origins. If you ask a random stranger in the street, they won't say they are Confucian, he says. But they will still be aware of certain expectations about how to behave as a sibling, a child, and an employee, which are connected to those ideas. Mr. Kim says that Confucian values are a living influence on Korean society because they are increasingly in conflict with newer ideas about individual freedom, personal autonomy, and sexual equality and the like. As elsewhere, sublimating disputes about how liberal a society should be
As elsewhere, sublimating disputes about how liberal a society should be into blanket reverence or disdain
into blanket reverence or disdain
for traditional values
for traditional values
does not make the underlying argument any easier
does not make the underlying argument any easier
to resolve.
to resolve.